Tantor Audio, a division of recorded books, presents Upon the Corner of the Moon, A Tale of the Macbeths by Valerie Nieman, narrated by Mhairi Morrison and Dave Gillies. Prologue. Before I was queen of all Alba, wife to High King Macbeth, I was wife to a ruler of Mhairi, not once, but twice. Before that, I was a student at the feet of the White Lady, learning to be a healer of the world. Before that, I was the heedless fosterling who looked into flames for her future. These many years I have listened for the voice of the goddess, and at times Mhairi and her son and the Christian saints, and learned that promises and predictions shape the world in terrible ways. 1. Gruach, Brechin Monastery, 1005. I was standing under the porch of the guest house, hands inside my sleeves for warmth. I wanted my new red mantle, not this shaggy, well-used thing that had been wrapped around me. My nose prickled at the strong odour of wet wool. Servants were hurrying to load pack-horses. Hooves drummed across the stone paths as the animals shied under the weight. And there was Necton among the men, strutting as though this sudden move had come at his whim. Why hadn't my brother been set aside, like me? I rocked from one foot to the other, couldn't decide if I wanted to join him. Finally, I crawled onto a bench, curled into a ball with my feet tucked under. But I watched and wondered. The bell had not yet been struck for the monks to be about their prayers, but 2 juniores had been roused to help. Candles and torches shone yellow in the abbot's hall and the monks' kitchen, where Blauheen had gone to get us food. The guest-house door opened and my mother came out. I started to get down, but then I saw who followed her. Ferchar, leader of a great people and my father's closest man. Mother turned to rest her hand on his broad wrist. "All is ready," he said, low, but his voice carried. "Messengers have ridden on to Golspie and will arrive well before." "Barring mischance." "I sent 3. Light flared and faded around them as wind through the open door tossed the flames. Why was Ferchar here? "So, Malcolm's to be made king today at the Hill of Belief," my mother said. "A hasty gathering, but I saw too many of the great upon departing Scone to think that many were caught unawares by Kenneth's felling at the Plain of the Bards." "And the king's bones are being carried to Iona?" "Malcolm has no quarrel with him now. He had none legitimate before. Legitimacy was made in one stroke, Lonsetta, and we must conform ourselves to the deed, as Bioch does." My dear honest Bioch, his brother's pledge ring on his finger and his blade at his throat. My father was in danger, that much I could tell, and it made me gasp. Ferchar placed his body between my mother and the noise in the dark. "Child," he said upon seeing me, "have you been there long?" My mother gathered me up in her arms, wiped the tears and rain damp from my face. "Ah, Daphnet. Little dear," the gentle name she called me by, rather than that ugly church name Gruach. Mother said it low, over and over, but I was not going to be soothed. What is happening to my father? The king is dead, I asked at last, curiosity winning out. I saw my mother look to Ferchar, as though waiting for him to speak. King Kenneth III is gone, she said finally. Who is being king then? Malcolm. After a moment, she continued. Your uncle, you remember that he gave you the hound pup at Easter time? It died. Did the king get stepped on by a horse, like Runner? My father's man laughed, short and harsh. Malcolm is quite old, I said, sure of that much. You must call him High King now. Ard Rí Alban, my mother said. Blauheen came hurrying from the kitchen, carrying food. I wriggled down and sat at the foot of the great stone cross. Mother seemed absorbed with Necton, watching as he acted so big, making a show of examining a bridle leather. Before I could finish the milk and the gritty barley bread, I was left alone again. Juniores in drab tunics held up torches that smoked and spit in the rain. A mare urinated, and workers shifted their paths around the steaming puddle. Ferchar was having something moved among the bags and bundles on one horse. His chin jutted out. Like my father, he could give orders and end confusion. "'Tis well we weren't at Monifieth," said one man. "Be loading boats then. These horses are no less witless, all over the place." A third growled. They know," said a man-at-arms, whose damp hair, blown aside, revealed a purple birthmark. Like Daniel to the lion's den, Beoch goes to a king's promise or a ready grave. And his babes too early to fostering. Into Mhairi. The man who disliked boats seemed doubtful. That would be bad to worse, with the Norse and Danes rampaging. And not south. They've scarce a bite of bread for themselves in Angleland, much less for newcomers. North is my thought. North. I felt the wind that pushed me toward the cold sea and strange people. I did not answer Blauheen's anxious call. "Here she is," said the birthmarked man. Ferchar himself came to collect me. "Time to be leaving, little one." "I'm cold. Why are we going in the night?" The company was all mounted, except for Ferchar. Even Necton rode a led pony, stumpy-legged and with one white eye. I did not want to ride with the birthmarked man. I planted my feet and crossed my arms. Mother came and knelt, enfolding me in her mantle, a place of comfort and imbued with a familiar green smell. "Warm yourself for a moment and be still. You are going to be fostered, just as other children are." "But I am only 5 winters and some more. I am not old enough." "But you will be with your brother, not by yourself, and you are grown very big." We walked to the horses. One of the novices took me by the hand, and I jerked away and slapped him. Just as quickly, my mother slapped my own wrist and tears came. "We are going to the Loch Lanach," I sobbed, feeling the North take hold of me with cruel hands. "We'll be taken as slaves." I felt all eyes on me and did not care, because I was being sent into the dark and the cold and the wild lands. My mother held me by the shoulders. "These Norse are farmers and fishers, just like our own people, and not wild beasts. I was picked up abruptly, and the juniore I'd slapped breathed unexpectedly hot breath in my ear. You'll be kept well enough within Orkney's reach, child. Then I was set down firmly before Ferchar, and felt something sharply cold against my side where the mantle had ridden up. I think it was the pommel of his sword, but I didn't try to find out. Do not make me ashamed of you, Mother said sternly, but her dark eyes shone. She took my hand, then let it slip free. I blinked back tears and sat straight, aware of my importance as I was riding with a clan leader. I wiped my nose on the back of my hand and looked down proudly on my brother. The abbot came, a monk holding up a lantern to light his way. They seemed to float in their tunics and dark cowls. A reflection flashed from the abbot's silver cross, and Nectan's mount rolled its mismatched eyes. The company was silent, even the horses hanging their heads as the blessing was made. God hold you in his hands. God be with you. And all murmured their response. We trotted into the seeping light of morning, past the new round tower still being built, rising to disappear in fog and rain, because it was now truly rain, heavy and driving against our faces. Past the windowed house where monks laboured over manuscripts, past wood and wattle cells, everything growing less distinct, it seemed, as dawn emerged through low clouds. A bird called twice. "When are we coming home?" I asked Nectan. He looked up, his round, ruddy face solemn as those of the armed men around us. "When I become a man, at 17 winters." I tried to think what that meant for me. We crossed the plank bridge over a ditch. The horses' hooves thudded softly, and then we went through the gap in a bank of earth. "That's an end of the holy ground," one of the men muttered. Outside the inner vallum, we passed the low houses of Brechin's people, the grain fields, and the barns wide and dark. Then another bank, and a third, and there was nothing but close weather and open grazings and the movement of cattle and sheep. I hid my face in a fold of Ferchar's broad. I didn't care now that the wool scratching my cheek smelled of smoke and old blood. If my parents had abandoned me, then Ferchar would protect me from the wild Loch Lannig. Golspie, Sutherland, 10:07. The door flew back with a bang, as though the ceaselessly sucking northern wind had finally pulled it from its latches. Startled, I pulled the fur to my chin, but my foster mother, Alpia, merely glanced up from her sewing and called, "Come in then, come." Nectan dropped something heavy inside the entry. Fode came after, struggling to shut the outer door. "Did you not feel the gentleness of this spring breeze?" Nectan asked his foster brother with assumed formality. His cheeks were burnished and wet, his dark brown hair wild around his head. "It was very soft," Fode said, struggling against the smile that broke across his face. "Spring it may be, by sun's reckoning, but that wind has ice to it," Alpia observed, tilting her head to bite off thread close to the fabric she was working on. She wound the thread carefully on its needle and put it in its case, and then both in her sewing box. "So, have you been gathering spring flowers?" The boys looked at each other. Stifling laughs, they went out and came back, each dragging a black auk bigger than a goose. "We went looking for eggs," Fode began. "Even though it's early, but we found gearful on the shore by the little bay," Necton said, using the Norse word for the great seabirds. "And they were hardly afraid at all. So we got very close and killed these with stones before the others went into the sea," Fode concluded. "They stink," I said. Necton twisted a familiar face at me. Then he and Fode went to stand close by the hearth. Their clothes steamed. Alpia folded the cloth and set it aside. She deliberated for a moment, her lips pressed together. "If the boys have brought us meat, then we must prepare it," she said, emphasizing we. I pretended not to hear, pulling close the coverlet that I clung to night and day. My mother had packed it and sent it with me. It had been pieced from the furs of small, soft animals. Alpia merely lifted it away and stood waiting. Her white hair, pulled back and braided under her scarf, made her look old, but I knew how enduring she was. She stood erect and walked as rapidly as a man. Derrelay had told me, with a sort of awe, that her mother's hair had been white as the goddess herself, ever since she was a young woman. "The girl will clean the fowl," I said, curling my body against the chill and reaching for the cover. "I believe it will not hurt you to have close acquaintance with the making of our food." I got up and shuffled behind Alpia, who caught up the birds by their webbed feet. They did stink, like old fish, and there was a long smear of filth down one's scaly legs. I could hardly believe they would be worth the cooking. The servant girl was making loaves when we went into the cooking area, which shared the double hearth with the main hall. Her mouth made an unhappy "oh" when she saw the birds. "No work for you, Mhairi, as I'd not care to find feathers baked in my bread," said Alpia, taking a slender, sharp knife and a hatchet from the kist. "Heat water in the cauldron." We pulled on mantles and went to the sheltered corner between the hall and the byre, to the broad stump of a storm-stranded tree. It was twice as wide across the bottom as the top, and might have been rooted there in the courtyard for the way it had sunk into the ground. Alpia deftly skinned the birds, lopped off the heads and black feet and short tails. With their long bodies and muscular necks, flesh shining with membrane, the auks looked like land creatures rather than birds. She began to draw the innards. I tried not to pay too close attention, but my foster mother was having none of that. "See here," she said, as she laid the innards on one of the skins and knelt to examine them. "The lungs and the heart. And what's it been eating?" She slit the bulging crop, and silvery fish slithered out. I looked toward the walls and beyond, the crashing sea, invisible in driving sleet, that had hidden the world under a grey bowl. "This is a female," she said, and I had to look. "See the little clusters? These will be eggs when the season for young arrives." It was strangely fascinating, all the hidden parts of the creature. I looked closer. The guts of the second bird revealed no such clusters. "The boys were not such hunters," Alpia observed. "The birds are life mates, male and female, and will not leave one another even in death." The household dogs had been lured by the smell of offal. One scarred hound leapt in and carried off the intestines, trailing them after as it bounded for the shelter of the byre. Alpia picked up the hearts and livers before the dogs could steal them as well. "Take these," she said. I held out my hands. The organs had cooled and seemed already less a part of the animals. They were slippery, though, with blood and flesh grease. Alpia wiped down the cleaned birds with a cloth, then sectioned them and put the pieces into the kettle along with the hearts. The livers were tender and would be added last. As we finished, Talorc returned home after a visit to lands that had been farmed by his man Sebi, recently dead of a lingering cough. He grabbed Alpia around the waist, turned up her face and kissed her long and heartily. "My white-veiled bride. And my young warrior, with his hair shining in the sun." They laughed at the well-worn joke. Talorc was shorn like a monk, the hair gone from the front of his head to past the crown. What remained was fine, wind-blown, the colour of sand. I watched my foster mother return to her work, choosing spices and roots to season the broth. I sniffed. The fishy odour dissipated as the seasonings heated. I picked up one of the little roots, like those that had gone into the pot, twisted it. A pungent scent, not entirely pleasant. "What is this?" But Alpia did not hear. She and Talorc were discussing the character of those contending for the right to till Sebi's ground. "As he left no children, it is between an uncle and a cousin." The one who's just had a son?" "That one, aye," said Talorc. "He has a strong arm, while the uncle has more than he can manage the tilling of now." I tugged at the servant's flower-dusted sleeve. "What is this?" Mhairi lifted her arm and pulled the sleeve from my fingers. "A root, child." I frowned. "But what is it called?" "For that, you'd have to ask the lady." And she nodded toward Alpia, respectfully, even as her thin mouth twisted with the strain of pulling a three-legged iron pot from among the coals. "She brings all such down from the hills, out from the edge of the sea." I dropped the twisted thing back into its bowl. My foster parents were laughing over a tale of some drunkard's fall at a slippery ford. This dead Sebi himself, it seemed. Their faces red as the man's in their story. The firelight showed the roughness of their faces and hands, winter scoured. They lived like plain farmers, their garments simple, and this fortified hall not much greater than the longhouses where family and beasts huddled together. Perhaps my parents did not know, I thought. Perhaps they believed that we would be fostered in a proper home and not this bare place. I stepped out of the path of the sweating girl, thinking I might slip away if Alpia had completed her lesson. "Men take twice their room when there's work to be done," Alpia complained, smiling as she did. Talorc shrugged his weather-stained green brot higher on his shoulders, pulled his hood over his head and went back out. "Gruach?" Alpia looked around. "There you are. Now, child, run and fill this measure with salt." I walked between Mhairi and the fire, throwing her a scathing glance in payment for my having to do work the servant should be doing. A bit of fat or water underfoot and I slipped, went down, hands and knees on the hearthstones. I saw the filth of ashes on my tunic and my hands reddened by the ochre on the stones. "I'm no slave," I protested, tossing my head at Mhairi. "My father will be king when my old uncle dies, and he'll know how you have used me." Alpia crossed her arms and smiled, an infuriating smile. I slapped at the smears of red and grey. "I'm of royal kindred. I shouldn't be here." "Your bloody-handed kindred is exactly why you're here," Alpia said. "Remember how you came? Stolen away and pursuit riding close." Like stolen things, yes, we had been carried away in darkness, but then abandoned. I felt like a king's daughter in one of the stories, snatched away to bitter slavery in a harsh land. I added to my misery by listening to the batter of wind against the walls and the moan of the ocean against the sandy shore. I might well be enchanted, like in the tales, under the earth with the old ones. But then, of course, there'd be magical light on beautiful pale faces, and wild music that made a year of a day, and incredible things to eat and drink. Here in Sutherland, claimed by the Norse king of Orkney, there was only the long darkness that filled the corners of the hall. As the ox simmered, the men sat down where the pieces from a game of fickle lay scattered, and set up the board for a new match. Fode, whose sandy hair promised his father's tonsure, frowned in concentration, while my brother leaned forward with eagerness to meet his countering action. Certainly that was why we had been sent here, only for Nectan's sake, to save him from that knife at the throat. He liked this rough life, this cold place where only barley could grow, and where the scattered people lived more by the raw work of fishing and hunting than by their hairy beasts and thin fields. It was making him tough, muscular, while as for me, I wished that I was less prone to sickness. In the deeps of the winter, just before the feast of the Nativity, I had fallen sick with what was thought to be a croup, but soon feared to be diphtheria. I remembered feeling tight inside my skin and very sad. That was, perhaps, because I would miss the celebrations. My throat became swollen, so that it hurt to swallow even fine wheat bread unless it was well soaked, but the final membrane never appeared. Alpia had nursed me with rubs and brews, but also with the press of her hands on my chest and a low, wandering song that had seemed to fill my lungs with cold, clean air. I dreamed sometimes that my father, Bioch, and mother, Lonsetta, realizing their mistake, had me brought back from the north and sent to a proper fosterage. Perhaps to a noble family in Éireann, or among the British of Strathclyde. I had heard people talk of Northumbria and Jorvik, and could scarcely imagine all those buildings close together and the clatter of tongues. I might as well dream of any other enchantment. A shiver passed through me, and I moved silently over to sit by the fire. Alpia, who had returned to her sewing, looked up as I silently tucked the fur around my legs. "Cold there in the dark corner, was it not? Feel yourself lucky that we do not live in my grandmother's time. The weather has changed, It was once much colder than it is now.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?